morning, everybody. So today we are going to talk about identity and access management, or IAM, which is a fundamental building block of information security. And specifically, we will look into CIAM, or Customer Consumer IAM, and how it is similar and also differs from traditional IAM solutions. Let us introduce ourselves before having a closer look at IAM and CIAM. So my name is Benoit Famechon. I'm an engineering manager. I work for Thales in the authentication solution platforms for the digital and identity security. I've been working on various topics and fields from telecommunication and embedded software development and mobile financial services, trusted service manager, and more recently, mobile identity and access management for both strong authentication server and cloud protection. And this is my colleague, Karen.
Hello, good morning. I'm Karen. I'm a security architect for Thales, DIS, for basically for identity and security protection. What else? I'm an inventor as well and have a number of patents. So LastCon is very important for me, and I was here at the very beginning of the LastCon. We actually started LastCon with several other people, and I have been here since then. I'm here almost every year. So in this talk, where, as Benoit has said, we are going to focus on identity and access management, or briefly, IAM. So IAM, as many of you know, is a foundation block of security. The IAM system manages user identities, which can be human and can be machine or devices, and it manages who can access what resources under which conditions. So IAM has been here for a very long time. As we said, is a foundation of information security. Why are we still talking about IAM? Right? You must be wondering, it's been forever. Why we're talking about it? Yes, it has been here for a very long time, for the very beginning. And as you all know, in the past few decades, the internet has greatly expanded, and so its technology advanced, and more and more things are online, more and more services online, and all the people around the world are accessing internet for resources. It's very different from the very beginning when IAM has started. So because of this rapid extension of internet technology and the people who can access all the services online, there are different requirements in different domains. For example, if you're in an organization or company or government agencies, they all have different requirements. So IAM functionalities and capabilities have greatly increased for the past few decades. And there are all different kinds of IAM systems to serve different purposes for different requirements for various domains, right? So there are many different types. When you have a company, or you have an agency, when you need to choose an IAM, which one do you select, right? What are the differences? There are many of them. So we can roughly group all these different kind of IAMs into two categories. So here, one category we'll call it Workforce IAM, or shortly we'll call them WIAM. And the other category, we'll call them the Customer or Consumer IAM or CIAM. So they are different, but they also have overlaps. And especially CIAM on the right-hand side has attracted a lot of attention recently, and it's growing very rapidly. But why this is happening, and what are common parts between Workforce IAM and the Consumer IAM, and what are they different, and how do we choose between the two, right? So that's what we're going to talk about, right? It's an old subject, but there are lots of things new. So let's look together to find the answers. First, let's have a very brief overview of what is IAM. And you may take courses for a day or days about IAM, but let's just take 1 minute to talk about this. In general, identity and access management system, as its name says, manages identity life cycles, right? And it authenticates users and control access to resources. That is at the very top level, manage identity and access resource. For example, it allows to define roles and the policies and the processes for access control. The policy can specify who or which role can access what resources under which conditions. The resource can include systems, applications, services, and the data. For example, the policy may specify authenticated user can access data he or she has created, basically access her own data, but cannot access other people's data. That can be a policy. An administrator can set up of a system, can set up the system, install software, but he cannot access any user data, right? So those are the policies. That's part of the IAM system can do. So all these actions are logged and for monitoring and auditing. And then we talk about the identity lifecycle, the user, right? The user can have different state. The user to start is unknown to anybody. And then the user can register or being created by admin, and it can be updated and it can be deleted. So that's about the life cycle. So IAM system provide authentication to know it's the right person to get into the system, and provide authorization. And also, another thing is the users nowadays can be human devices or or applications, right? Can be a human or machine, basically. So now let's, that's in general, what is IAM. Now let's take a look at the WIAM. Okay, so what is the Workforce IAM? The Workforce IAM manages users and their access to the protected resources. It's typically used for organization, companies, or government agencies. So the users typically are employees and partners or contractors. Okay, your turn.
So WIAM or IAM is well known, as Karen mentioned. Now let's talk about CIAM and what is CIAM and look at more details about it. So the C for CIAM stands for customer or consumer, and whereas in workforce we are looking inwards to employees, contractors, and basically the scope is within the enterprise. Here in CIAM we are looking outwards. It's basically the customer of the company as a service provider or the consumer of the services. So from that standpoint, there are different types of industry that basically CIAM is dealing with. And with that, various needs and requirements. You can imagine from finance, banks, insurance, healthcare, retail, that you have basically different regulation and different compliance that you have to fulfill as part of those. Also, you'll have a different variety of customer and situation. You can imagine from the just, a random person browsing your website just to look for information, or maybe to look for possible service providers, to someone that is subscribing to like a movie or series or TV series part, or like, let's say, if I'm a citizen and I want to use some government services as well. So there's a need in CIAM for flexibility and customization as part of these overall components. And one aspect that is also very important in CIAM compared to Workforce or traditional IAM is the user experience. Because customers are coming to your website and you want to make sure that they are attracted and they are retained and stay there. So you want to make things easy, simple, and in order to retain and for them to continue to come to your website. So user experience is very key for CIAM. So some of the features or functionality of CIAM are, for example, the customer registration and sign up. This process needs to be really, a very nice user experience to onboard and to keep the user. Self-service, lots of capability of self-service, so the user can manage his consent, his preference, can take care of a lot of activities on his own, which is very different from like enterprise IAM or workforce IAM, where you have set processes and so on. Also authentication using single sign-on and multi-factor where it's needed, so that you can adapt your authentication based on the services that the user is gonna use. Identity verification, proofing of the user, used for mobile application or SDKs or any type of device and different types of device implementation that your consumer or your customer are going to use. And also things like progressive profiling. So that means that as your user is going to enter your website, you're going to give your data, but you're not going to ask them for like a huge form to fill in at the first step that will, scare them out and will be, not a nice way. So, and we'll see some example as we go along the way. And so very important, the frictionless user interaction for a good user experience, managing resources for external users, collecting the data as you go in order to build a profile for the user so that you can provide a personalized user experience and some of the use cases that we discussed. So now we are going to see some example and features along the way for those. So one disclaimer, just these examples are provided as illustration purpose only, and they are not any endorsement of any brand at this point. It's just basically just to illustrate some of the functionality and features of CIAM. So as a user or consumer or customer, my journey as a consumer may start as a anonymous browsing a website. I will look maybe for different insurance quotes. So as I go through this, I will be asked, in a CIAM system, to enter some information that will help generate, for example, this insurance quote. So maybe just my zip code in order to figure out where I live and to provide, quotes that will match this. Maybe as I go further, I may be asked, in the next few steps to enter maybe some information about my cars or my house or things like that. And maybe to later on, to provide an email address or a phone number in order to receive this quote. And that's basically kind of a start of a journey. And as part of that, part of building, a profile, even though I'm not yet a customer of, given service provider. Also, one important aspect to it is as I enter my information, so basically I'm giving consent for the service provider to use that information for the purpose to, for example, in this case, to generate a quote for my insurance. And that information later on can be retrieved and reused in order to continue personalize my journey on this service provider. So there's different types of consent. It's either consent on some specific information or attribute, and there could be also consent on terms and conditions when you enter a website or you sign up and register for a website. That would be kind of document type of consent. And as I was mentioning, so the collection of the user data along the journey, rather than forcing the user to enter all at once in a big form, is what we call the progressive profiling. And that allows organization to build a user profile over time by prompting the user along the way where it's needed for additional information or preferences in order to have a more customized user experience. So here, something you're familiar with, just another example, the LASCON registration. Basically, here in this case, we see another aspect to CIAM is basically the single sign-on using social logins. That's an important aspect of CIAM, is to give easy way for user to sign on, but also to give them choice. So not only you're gonna give them single sign-on with different service provider, but in this case, you also give them the possibility to sign up using their email. And maybe for some other provider, it would be using your phone number or some other means. What's important in CIAM is to give customer the choice so that they have also the convenience to be able to choose what they prefer. And they have no restricted or limited say in that. Another example that we see there is as you create your account, you will accept and basically give your consent to the term and condition and privacy policy. So that means that basically that's the document consent that I just mentioned earlier. So on this slide, basically just to show also a different way that CIAM is providing authentication as part of their services. When you arrive to a website, you can log on to a self-service portal or to your own portal, either through social logins, email, or various other ways, or phone number. But you can also browse the website. You look for your next place to stay in Austin, and only when you're about to purchase the service, then at that point you can enter or sign in with your single sign-on. So basically, it's important in CIAM to give a flexibility of the user and not to force him to authenticate right from the start where it's not needed. It's really just to adapt based on the situation and the service that are needed. Another aspect is, in this case, I take the example of a citizen service. This is a French website for paying tax. So just to highlight some pieces important for CIAM. So you have your self-service portal. So you can imagine that, as a citizen, I want to be able to access my tax information, maybe make some change on property tax or things like that. So in order to do that, then you'll use some service that are providing identity verification service proofing. So in this case, it's a service called France Connect that will have prior register and verify the identity of user using their passports, driving license, or identity cards. So that's important in order to protect the access to my tax information and be able for me to change those information where needed. Now, there's another service which is basically just to pay my tax, which is below. And for this one, you don't need to authenticate through that service. You can just provide your tax ID and your payment information, and the IRS will be happy. They don't need to have all this more fancy authenticated way for that matter. So it's basically to demonstrate that you have adaptive authentication based on the service and the needs, basically. Yeah. Now, next aspect of CIAM is profile management. So profile management is basically the capability for the user, the consumer, to update, to view, to change his or her data along the life cycle and along the journey. So here are some examples where you create a profile, you can set up some preferences. You have also like the consent there. So that just to give some example. And those basically profile information are important. They will be used as a way to build the profile that will have let's say customized experience for the end user. So you can imagine, for example, it will be your most ordered item. For example, they can use that in order for you whenever you go next time to the website to show you, what are basically the items that you may be interested in, or maybe there's some recurrent notification. Let's say it's your pharmacy that is, every month will send you a text message telling you these are, your medicines available or things along this way. Another example of profile creation, you've seen this one. So for the last registration. So. And last but not least, digital experience. So that's how all this comes together for a customer or consumer. So as we have built a profile or a user profile that is basically going to be used across all the devices so that you can have personal interaction. So imagine, you start watching your TV series at home on your smart TV, and now you're going to go, and you take your tablet and you want to continue to watch, your TV series. That would be very disruptive if you have to reselect and re-go through it, whereas, with a unified profile, you are able to basically continue seamlessly from where you were and continue your journey as a customer, as a user. And by digital experience, that means also that your application and your service needs to be not only just a website, maybe a mobile application, maybe some, working for tablets, small size, big size phone, smart TV, could be any kind of devices. So there's a much more, a bigger variety of user interaction and for that. And one last item for which is kind of part of that for CIAM is the branding. So it's very important to have a consistent branding. Branding is a very key thing for users and consumers to be able to recognize that, across the various devices, that they are on the same journey with the same service provider. Now that we talked about WIAM and CIAM, so let's compare them.
All right, so you have learned a lot about CIAM, and you all know about WIAM, right? Because we've been using it, and people have been using it for past many decades. So with these two types of IAMs, what are they in common? So let's take a look, right? And both systems, let's summarize, okay? We'll do a more detailed comparison afterwards. So at a high level, both IAMs, they both process access requests, right? At work, you want to access your work resource, the data or whatever you're doing for work. Or with CIAM, you want to book a flight, right? And so those are all requests for access, either data or services. So they both have, in order to do that, they both have to have authentication. Some of it have multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication in the past is more or less for the workforce IAM. Now more and more the CIAMs requires, they don't require, they recommend multi-factor authentication. For example, with OTP or with your face, with fingerprint, etc. Right? So at Workforce IAM, it's maybe your organization or the company requires you, but with CIAM, they recommend you to use multi-factor authentication for better protection. Some of them will go through they call the federation, or federation is, for example, you want to use a cloud service for your work, and it may redirect you back to your workplace login system, authentication system, right? That's it's a federation from the cloud service side with your company's IAM. Or when you try to, like Benoit had an example, Airbnb, you try to find a place to stay on your trip, and then you can use different way to log in, right? You can log in with, you can create a new account with Airbnb, or you can use your Google account, right? Or you use your Facebook account. So that's that's the federation, to use external identity provider, let's call it, okay? And then what do they have? They both have authorization, that's who can access what data under what conditions, right? That's, it's more important on the WIAM side, right? And for CIAM side, you can only access your own data, right? You cannot access other things. They both have a registration part, right? In order to use a new service, and you register. You register. Nowadays, I found that even for medical services, you go to see your doctor, and then they'll tell you that your result is in this website, right? You need to register, and then you can update the change of address, etc. So that's manage the user, and for WIAM side, that's probably all registered by your HR, right? But they both have a registration, manage users' life cycle from the start to update to if you want to leave to delete. So in old days, if we can imagine, we can in old days the website, for example, for emails, so if we use free emails or use other services, you can create an account, you cannot update. You can update your account, but you can never delete. I think nowadays many websites allow you actually delete yourself from the website. I think that's more of after the GDPR, that's the European privacy regulation, and the more website allow you to delete. So that's all part of managing the user's life cycle. Another thing it's relatively new for even for traditional IAM is to provide APIs. So it not only a human user can interact with a website or with a service, but also make it possible for the IAM to integrate with other external systems, for example, for federation, right? And also allow machine-to-machine communication. So they, all these systems provide APIs. And we also know we're in a security conference, right, with security professionals. We know there's a lot of adversaries over there try to take advantage of your system, so you have to protect your APIs. And so that's also the part they are in common. And even though they have all these common parts, but some part they may do it differently. We'll see more details afterwards. So let's see what's on the WIAM side. So what are additional things that CIAM would not provide? So one of the things is called approval workflow. And for example, if you want to do at work, if you want to perform certain work functions, you may need approval process, especially you want to access some data for use or for change or even create something. The approval process may include several steps. For example, the user needs to authenticate and then make a request for access some services within the company. And then, especially for things in your daily work, you normally don't access, then you will say, okay, I will need to use this particular service or server or machine for this period of time. And then somebody, well, that's specified in the policy, have to approve the request. And so based on the policies which has been set up. And so with WIAM, for enterprise, you normally define roles, and then you manage the policies. The roles specify, for example, engineering can access, the software developer can access software they develop, and the operation people can access what, and the accounting people can access all the finance data, but the software engineer will not be able to access. And then there's marketing people who can access the marketing material and the certain things, right? So with enterprise IAM, it is important part, WIAM is an important part to define roles and access control policies, who can access what, right? Under what conditions. And then auditing is also an important part, and so who has done what, who has accessed the system at what time. And of course, reporting, analytics for the resource access. And another thing is the IAM system typically integrated with the HR system, because HRs, they have all the employees or contractors and partners information. And the CIAM side, the extra things is exactly as what Benoit have shown you. It have a lot more self-service, right? On the WIAM side, many things is actually done by your company, by HR. And it's not, if you join a company, you have to follow the rules. And with CIAM side, that's not the case. If you don't like it, you can always leave. There are always other options available, right? And if I want to do shopping and I don't like Amazon, or I don't like a particular car website, I can, just try a different one. But with work, if you don't like it, you have to find another job, right? So that's different. You can have more self-service. And as we've seen before, there's a consent, right? To consent to provide your data. For example, if you go to a doctor's office using their website, you schedule your exam, and there's consent. You have to check box and for example, to allow your doctor to access the result, your test result. So all the CIAMs, because they're dealing with user and the user's private information, they have to be compliant with privacy regulations. For example, in Europe, there's a GDPR, And then in US, well, for health-wise, there's a HIPAA, and there's California's, what they call it, CCPA or CCAP, the California privacy regulations. Yeah, so, and another thing is on the CIAM side, there's profiling and social logging. And then they have more marketing. Actually, the IAM system will help for the marketing and trying to establish brand. Okay, so we looked at it in general, what are they the same, what are they different. Now we have a little more detailed comparison.
So now we're gonna go look through like, you know, 3 summary tables of the main pieces of comparison between CIAM and WIAM before concluding. So in was basically who we are looking for. So as we mentioned earlier, in Workforce IAM is like more inwards, you know, employees, subcontractors, and so on. Whereas in CIAM is like, you know, outwards, all the external, you know, facing consumer, citizen, customers. Now, who is in control? So in Workforce, you know, the enterprise or your organization has set processes for hiring employees and the life cycle of, you know, the employment or the users. Where in CIAM, it's a little different. The provider, yes, is in control of providing access to the services, but the customer is also in control in some ways because he can choose at any point of time to leave your service. If you're not providing a good user experience, then, you know, he has some other choice. So that's a very different aspect. Also, in terms of focusing, Workforce IAM is more looking at security in the sense trying to manage role and access, to protect sensitive data and resources in the enterprise to reduce the risk. Whereas in consumer or customer IAM, it's more a balance with, you know, user experience and security. You want to make sure that you provide a frictionless and personalized user experience so that you can increase the user interaction and engagement with your services. In terms of scale, it's different. In an enterprise, you know who your employees are, who your contractors are. You know what is your base of users. Whereas in CIAM, it can be virtually anybody. Yeah. And the pattern of usage also is different. You know, in most typical organization, let's say, you know, employee will log in the morning, you know, after lunch, and they access their application, you know, being, you know, your HR application, your engineering applications, and so on. Whereas in a CIAM business, it's very different. I mean, you may have some spikes of traffic because there's a new promotion or there's a marketing event or it's tax season. And, you know, all of a sudden there's very big variation happening. It's not as predictable there. Also, availability in Workforce IAM, like availability of a services is dictated by, you know, by IT or business needs, whereas in CIAM, there's the expectation that your service will be available regardless of the peaks of traffic or not. It has to be available over time. It'd be really annoying to try to watch your last episode of a TV series and service is done, right? So that's kind of some of the differences generally between the two there.
All right, we have a little bit short time. Okay, let's look at the security and the privacy aspect. So they both have to have security, right? But they are quite different. On the WIAM side, it requires high levels of security because it wants to protect the company's resources and the data and the resources, and want to reduce risk. That's the important thing. So the basic principle on the WIAM side is least privilege, right? You just need least privilege to perform your work. And on the CIAM side, it's the security is depend on what is being used. For example, if it's for government services, right? The citizens use particular government service. They require a higher level of security. But with other, for example, social media, and they may require lower level of security. What is more important for CIAM is ease of use, is user convenience. And they want to balance the security and the usability. For WIAM side, the security is most important. And from compliance perspective, for WIAM, they typically need to satisfy the secure companies' security policies or industrial security standard. For WIAM side, the personal data protection is more important, as we mentioned with GDPR and other privacy regulations. And from trust perspective, for WIAM, they're known users, right? A company knows who are their employees. They don't want strangers to be able to access the company's system. But for CIAM, it's unknown users, right? You want to attract as many people in the world as possible, right? So they're dealing with unknown users. And then if the users, if they like the brand, and they may create an account, right? And the user may create multiple accounts. For example, I don't know how many of you, but many people, they have multiple Gmail accounts, right? You can just use fake name and create an account. True user may have, multiple accounts. But with WIAM, you cannot do that, right? I'm Karen Liu. My company knows I'm Karen Liu. I cannot create another fake account, right? So from the authentication, for WIAM side, there are some similarities, right? They can use the directory service. They can use OIDC. On the WIAM side, they may use SAML for federation. And there are still many companies doing that, right? Multi-factor authentication is typically a company required you do multi-factor authentication. And on the CIAM side, you can use social login. And you can also use OIDC, OpenID Connect for federation. And optionally, you can use multi-factor authentication. From the privacy perspective, on the WIAM side, it's more or less controlled by HR or by IT, right? And the HR specifies, and then you have the access control policies, who can access which resource. I'm sure my manager can access my personal data with respect to work. Benoit's manager may not be able to access, right? But HR has all the access. On the CIAM side, the user has control of their personal data, at least in theory, right? Okay, I already mentioned the personal data is administered by HR. And for the CIAM side, it's for business need to collect user data and to gather. Of course, they have to be with consent, but the goal is really for the business, for the brand.
Okay, and last table to continue summarizing the different items.
Minutes.
It's basically about user experience. So we talked about most of it. I'll just maybe highlight a few items there. That in the case of Workforce IAM, so a lot of it is controlled by internal processes and so on. There's very limited branding capability, and also the digital experience is limited and controlled which device, and you may have to have some like specific, work profile on your mobile, for example, if you want to use some of your application from work. Whereas in SIAM, the aim is really to have like a great user experience, to have like frictionless interactions and ease of use for the user, and provide them with options so that they can choose something along the list that they may want to do or that they may already have an account for, like single sign-on with your social login. They may download your app, or maybe they don't like to download your app, they can use other means as well. So that's more that. And just to close on that, so basically WIAM and CIAM have very similar functionalities, but they serve different purposes. It reminds me of a well-known dilemma of usability versus security. In this case, it's more about security versus user experience. And I would say in the case of Workforce IAM, the balance is more geared toward security and access control, whereas in the customer and consumer IAM, user experience is key, while data collection and remaining compliant with regulation is also a second aspect to that. And that's about it for our talk. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.